Hello everyone, welcome back to this channel. In this video, we shall be concluding our series on literature gap. Specifically in this video, we shall be discussing how to find the gap inside the literatures or the journals that we downloaded for our studies. Remember, they are the same thing. Alright, there are different ways through which we can go about this. I will be giving us a quick rundown on how to go about them. The first way we can find the gap inside our literature is through the variables used inside the literature. If you could recall in the formats of literature mapping that I gave in the earlier videos, it consists of all these things that is being highlighted here. And specifically, every literature that we download online often consists all these things except number 7 item. Most of the time, it is not all studies that show number 7 item. All right, let's dive into our discussion. The number one way through which you can cover or identify a gap in literature is the variable. Let me quickly take you back to the formats of the literature gap that I gave earlier on in our previous video rather. All right, if you could see these formats, or let me say, I hope you can still recall these formats. What can you see here? We can see dependent variables, independent variables, control variables. Okay, so inside these variables that you are seeing here, dependent, independent, control variables, you can identify gap in them. After you might have done your systematic literature review, or let me say an extensive literature review, because you might actually not want to do a systematic literature review is quite rigorous. Okay, so let me stick to the word extensive literature review. So after you might have done your extensive literature review and you've considered the various kind of variables, both dependent and independent variable, or even probably control variables that existing authors have used in their work, and you've read extensively too, and you realize that there are better variables to capture your dependent variables and your independent variable. That is a gap, and you can use that in your own study. You can identify that as a gap. That all right, these literatures made use of this particular variable for their dependent variable or independent variable, or probably they do not include control variable, or probably the control variables they included are not much, or you felt that, or let me say you saw that there are more better variables to capture the control variables that could help to explain the influence of the independent, that could help to explain the relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable better. That's a gap. You could also decide to add another variables like moderating variable or mediating variables. We are going to talk about these variables in our subsequent video. Your gap could be inside the independent variable specifically. Probably the study does not cover enough variables to measure the independent variable. You could extend the independent variable. Or probably you felt that the independent variable that was used in the literatures that you map out does not really carry weight, or let me say the way it has been discussed in the body of the work, you realize that it does not really possess much influence on the dependent variable, and you know that there are other independent variables or better variables that could explain it further. You could make use of those variables. That's a gap. So, gap in variables could come independent variables, independent variables, or both variable. It could also be inside your control variable, or you could also add other variables that are called moderating variables or mediating variables. Okay, another way at which you can identify gap inside the literature that you downloaded is scope. And just the way that I highlighted it here, scope is divided into two. Now, what do we mean by scope? Scope means the coverage of the study, the areas that the study covered. If you could recall, whenever you are structuring your idea into title, most of the time they are always broad. So you need to limit it within a scope. That's what scope means. That is, you need to limit it within a particular setting or within a particular coverage so that you can capture and explain your dependent and independent variable better in that particular coverage. So this is being referred to as scope, and is divided into two. It's divided into year, it's divided into industry. Okay, let me take it one after the other. When you're talking about scope that is related to year, the existing literatures that you map out could cover little year range, and you might want to extend the year range. It could cover an old year range, and you felt that things has changed in the economy. We see. And then you now want to extend it beyond those years, because what happened in 1990 or in 2000 is not what is happening now. So you could now extend the year range from what the literatures, the existing literatures has captured, to include the immediate year range, so that you can explain better the influence of your independent variable on your dependent variable within those year range. Another thing is industry. The literatures that you mapped out might cover different kind of organizations in different industries. For instance, it could be in oil and gas sector. You know, oil and gas sector is divided into four. We have the upstream, we have the downstream, we have the coal sector, then we have the equipment sector too. It could be pharmaceutical company, it could be manufacturing company, it could be banking industries, it could be agricultural industry, it could be different kind of industry. So you might think that, all right, all the existing literatures has covered different kind of industry, and then there is a particular industry that they've been leaving out. As a result of that, you now want to focus the scope of your study in another industry entirely that those literatures has not been capturing. Or probably they'll be capturing the manufacturing industry. You know, manufacturing industry is divided into different kind of organizations too. Probably they'll be inside the manufacturing industry, all they've been covering is probably beverages. You might want to consider other organizations inside manufacturing industry. That's what we refer to as scope. Now let me take you back to the formats of our literature map is there. I hope you can see here. I hope you can see these dates, the data and period. I hope you can see the data that this particular first study covered is 2011 to 2020. Now you might now want to extend your own studies beyond this. If you are focusing, if you are considering the scope of your year scope rather, You might want to extend it to 2023 and extend this 2011 beyond. You might want to go as far back as 2000. You understand? So that's what this is all about. You might want to ask a question that, since I said this scope is divided into year and industry, is it compulsory I use both of them, or should I just use one? Yes, it is compulsory you use both of them. Both of them must appear in your study. The year scope, the industry scope, it has to appear as gap inside your study. They are important. Now, the next thing is our knowledge gap. This often comes as a result of your expertise in that area that you are researching on. You understand extensively what is going on in that particular industry or in that particular area that your project, your research project or your research article is covering. Or probably through the literatures that you've mapped out. While mapping it out, you are reading them extensively and you understand that no, there is still something in knowledge that needed to be covered. That's what knowledge gap is all about. Now, by definition, knowledge gap is understanding, demonstrating an in-depth understanding of a particular subject, where more research is needed to fill the gap. You have this kind of in-depth understanding of that area, and you felt that the way it is being discussed is not robust enough. And as a result of that, you see that, or you realize that as a gap, and then you felt that yes, it is worthy of filling. Most of the time, you can't find this inside the format of the literature map that I gave to you. This often come out as a result of our in-depth understanding in a particular subject, in a particular area, or in our field, and we see that it is not well discussed. So that's what knowledge gap is all about. All right, let's move to the next one. This conceptual gap. That's another thing. A bit related to the knowledge gap. Conceptual gap is often related to a concept or a theory. Our research project, or let me use the word every literature, either your research project or research article, including the literature that you downloaded, that you want to use for your study, that you are mapping out, consists the chapter 2, or let me say the session 2, consists of number 1, concept review, 2, theoretical review, empirical review, and you take out your gap. So while going through the concepts, you may realize that the way the concepts, or let me say the conceptual review or the conceptual framework aspect is being discussed, it is not robust enough to capture that study or to capture the way that particular topic is being discussed in that area, and you felt that there is a need for it to be discussed further in a better way, in a better light, or probably from another dimension entirely. That's also a gap. It could also be the theory being used, you understand, in the study. And you felt that this theory could be extended beyond the way it is. That's also a gap. Now, for instance, there may be a need for you to do more research to understand the relationship between two concepts used in the study. capture that reveal that theory realize the way it has been used over time in line with sustainability. And it felt that this theory, yes, it covers a particular aspect of the way resources are being used in organization to capture their output or their value chain. But it does not capture the way it can be used in a sustainable way. And what does that study do? It extended that theory further. That's the gap that study saw and extended that theory further. Change the theory, no, not change it, rather extended it, redefined it in a new light so that it can capture the concept of sustainability. That study extends that theory, which is resource-based theory, to be green resource-based theory in order for you to cover the sustainability aspect, how resources are used to achieve organizations' value chain in a sustainable way. That's a gap. Also, like knowledge gap, this you can never see this while mapping your literature. It's not in the format I gave to you. Then you could discover it and then put it down inside your gap while going through the literature that you are mapping. It's not compulsory you bring it out like inside the format that you are seeing here that I gave to you. It's not compulsory that you bring it out. You might want to bring it out, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But most of the time, it's not compulsory. You might correct it inside the concept of the theory when you're doing work, and then you felt that because you know better, you felt that this is not well discussed, and then there is a need for you to discuss better. Then the next one we want to talk about is gap inside method used in the study. For instance, you might feel that the method used inside the studies that you are mapping out, or let me say the literatures that you are mapping out, does not address the questions, their research questions very well. And you might feel that there may be a need for more research to develop a new research method in order to explain those questions better, or probably to refine the existing method in order to address the specific questions better. For every study you are carrying out, there is objective, a reason why you are carrying it out. There is question, or let me say there are questions to ask. There are objectives, the main reason you are carrying out that particular work, and there are questions to ask. Those questions help you to answer or cover those objectives. And for those questions, there are methods you can use to approach them. Different kind of methods. Let's quickly take a sneak peek to the formats we've been using in my so far. Okay, for instance, I want you to look at this. Let's consider the first study, this mental health. I hope you can see their question. ESG information disclosure is beneficial to improve stock liquidity. Sorry, a quick one. This is not how to structure the research question, but this is structure in form of hypothesis. Not directly, yes, not directly. We still get there and explain better and further. Now, in order to capture this particular one, I want you to take a look at the method used. They use a baseline method, a baseline regression mode method in order to answer this hypothesis question. Now, if you have an in-depth understanding or probably an expert, or after a rigorous reading on that particular area or on existing literature, you realize that there are better ways to capture this question rather than this method being used there. You still of studies that you are carrying out. For instance, you might think that there is a need for more research to collect data on specific population, or probably to develop a new method of layering a particular data in order to easily capture a particular question. Now, for instance, you might be carrying out a training data, or let me say a qualitative data study, and the way you see they structure their questionnaire, or let me say their instruments, because it goes beyond questionnaire, their instruments, you might find that it doesn't capture those questions enough. There is a data problem, and you felt that if you extend it further, or probably if you could increase it, you understand, it's going to better explain it. Okay, let me give you more specific instance so that you can understand what I'm trying to say better. For instance, let's say that you are carrying out a quantitative study that other existing literatures has made use of questionnaire as the instrument to capture their question, research question. And the way they structure their questionnaire, probably you realize that they structure the questionnaire in such a way that it has been a close-ended questionnaire. And you felt that the way the instrument is structured does not give room to capture the question very well. You might see it as a doubt. Now, come you change the way the questionnaire is being structured. Probably existing literature made use of close-ended. You might use your own. You might structure your own to be an open-ended questionnaire, so that it's going to give your participants enough way to express themselves in order for you to capture themes or things that will be useful to analyze your questions better. Or you might find that, oh, okay, existing literatures made use of questionnaire alone, either open-ended, closed-ended, or whatever it is. And you felt that this is not capturing the objective or the research question enough. And you felt that if you could back this questionnaire with interview, either in-depth interview or key informant interview, is going to explain the question better. I hope you understand. Or you might feel that, okay, let's take for instance that you are carrying out a longitudinal research yourself, and the space the space, or let me say the period through which those data were gathered and observed, is not robust enough to capture the changes of things or changes of events that would actually influence and enable you to capture better the research question. That would be better. You might check it without extend it a year, so that you can get a better insight into the behavior of participants when it comes to data gathering by the use of longitudinal research. We are going to discuss it in our subsequent video, because that is an in-depth, it requires an in-depth explanation on its own entirely. Alright, let's continue. The last one that we want to discuss is suggestion for further studies. Not all literatures often consist of this. Most of the time, literatures that brings up suggestion for further studies are mostly conceptual literatures. What do I mean by conceptual literatures? These are literatures that does not make use of scientific method to analyze their data. Let me quickly show you something inside our formats here, so that it will be easy for you to identify these things when you are mapping out your literature. There is what we call empirical literature. There is what we call conceptual literature. I want you to look at every literature that is being mapped out inside this particular literature map. I hope you can see them. Our dependent variable, the objectives, the dependent variables, the independent variable, the control variable, data period. Now let's look at the method. Baseline regression mode, 4-factor model, multi-factor model, augmented with momentum, bidirectional fixed effect model, regression analysis, and so on and so forth. This that you are seeing here, all these literatures are called empirical literature. Why do I say that? You can see them inside their method here. All these methods stated here required what? They are empirical means, or let me say, they are scientific means to analyze a data. Another way you can know that a study is empirical is look at the data and the control variables, the independent variables, the dependent variable. Look at the dependent variable. They are all secondary data variables. What do I mean by secondary data variables? They are variables that are existing, that you are not the one that has to go to the field to gather them. They are already existing. You just need to extract them out from a particular database. You understand? So all these variables are quantitative variables that are extracted out from a database. And the database used here in the first study is Bloomberg. The second study is US traded firms rated by MSCI. The database used for this particular second study is MSCI. For the third one, how we can see, they said by using relevant data from Sino Security Index, this is their own database. For the fourth one too, Trustco and Facets in the US, that's the database. This one, for the last one, China Stock Market and Accounting Research, China Stock Market, that was where they got their data from. So their secondary data, they're already existing. All you need to do is just harvest them, pick them out from a particular database. These kind of studies are often empirical study because the method at which you can use to analyze those data in order to capture the research question is only through empirical means. But for conceptual does not entails you to analyze anything empirically. You could make use of qualitative data to gather your information, your data, and then you can still analyze it quantitatively or empirically. I intentionally said this in order to balance up what I said earlier on, so that you are not going to think that only quantitative data are empirical studies. No. You can gather your data through qualitative means. Your questionnaire, your interview, your observation, whatsoever, and then you can still analyze those studies quantitatively. Do you understand? But when it comes to conceptual paper, you just need to do a systematic literature review. This is very important. You do a systematic literature review. After doing a systematic literature review, you look at what this person said, their conclusion, the conclusion of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K to Z. You look at them, consider them, and from everything that they concluded on, you now draw out your own findings and make your own conclusion. It doesn't entail any empirical analysis. It doesn't entail you to go to the field to either gather data qualitatively or quantitatively. All you just need to do is to do a systematic literature review and consider their findings, consider their conclusion. Put them together. Use it to discuss your own work. And then out of your discussion, you now draw out your own conclusion and findings. So most of the study that consists of suggestion for further studies are often conceptual studies. Okay, they might look at the way a particular topic or subject has been discussed in the past, probably over 10 years, over 15 years, over 20 years, and try to bring out the gap that are existing in those literature that those literatures doesn't cover. And they are going to suggest is for further studies. It could also be inside a particular theory too. The way theory is being used to research studies, empirical studies. It could be. So when you see your suggestion for further studies inside the literature that you are reviewing, is an opportunity for you to, is an opportunity for a gap for you to be filled. Another thing is that this suggestion for further studies often stem from the problems identified or questions or probably hypotheses developed to answer them. The areas of your study. It could be in form of the question identified, the way it is being answered, or probably the way the hypothesis is being answered too. So gap will come in different ways. The last question you might now want to ask is that, can I make use of the whole gap inside my study? Let's say that I am lucky. I find this whole gap in the literatures. What do I mean by this? Gap number 1 to 7. Inside the literature that I mapped out. Can I make use of the whole 7 inside my work? Or probably, is it just 1 or 2 of the gap that we make out? Make use of rather. My answer will be this. It depends on what you are trying to do. But one thing is important. For your work, for your research project or research article, or in order to make your work robust, at least your gap could be in form of variable. Scope, remember, scope for years, scope for industry is important for both of them to be there. So your gap for variable, your gap for scope, your gap for method, your gap for data is compulsory. If you are lucky to see them in the literature that you map out, that's beautiful. You could go combine them together. The more gap you identify, the better your work is contributing to social studies, or let me just say social objective or social goals in your field. If you could recall in our previous video, I said that gap is what makes any studies that you are trying to do to be relevant. Without gap, then what you are doing is not contributing to social goal in your field of study. So the more the gap inside your work that you identify and you are feeling, the more the relevance your study to your field of study. You understand? The more relevant, the more useful it will even become for other researchers or scholars that are coming up later on to come and write in that particular area that you've written on. So if you see knowledge gap, you're lucky to realize a knowledge gap. Why not add it? Other type of gap, add it. But at least there are things you need to look out for. Gap in variables, gap in scope, gap in method, gap in data. If you see those things, those 4 things that I if you see those 4 things that I mentioned in your literature map, please include the 4. If you don't see up to the 4, the ones that you see, please include them. Now, if you're not lucky to now see knowledge in a gap in knowledge or concepts, include them too. For suggestion for further studies, it now depends on what you want to do. If you see an opportunity for suggestion for further studies in any literature that you are reviewing, then that shows that you need to structure your objective, your question around that suggestion of further study in order for you to fulfill the gap that has already been identified from existing literature. I hope this video has been insightful. We are going to meet in our next video. If you are here to subscribe to this channel, what are you waiting for all this while? Come on, please subscribe. Turn on your notification button. Share with your friends. Share with your colleagues. Once you turn on your notification button, it will give you the opportunity to always know whenever we drop a new resources. And if you have any question, please go ahead and drop it in the comment section. I will always be available to answer every of your questions. So till then, see you in the next video.